Okay, we're going to look at this situation now where we've got more than one item on the line, particularly if we're going to be doing high score tables or things like that. We're going to need to do this. We're going to need to store data on one line, 2 bits of data, and we're going to need to read and play around with 2 bits of data. So I'm going to pop over to the shell so that we can play around a little bit with the strings before we even try to write any programs for it. And I'm also going to go back to string manipulation, because the answer that we really require is in here. So let's think about it first. Let's go back to our shell. If I've got a string, data equals Joe 20. That's just one piece of data, it's just a string. And from our point of view, we're looking at 2 pieces of information. One is the string, the name Joe, and the other piece of information is 20. 20 is a number. But at the moment, 20 is part of a string. We can't add strings together, numbers together, it just doesn't work. So let's take a look at that. So if I just did print 20 plus 1, I don't end up with 21, I end up with 201, because it's just joined them together. So actually, if I want to start playing around with these numbers and use them as numbers, particularly when I'm comparing them, is the number 18 larger than 20? No, but I can't do that as a string. It won't work that way. I've actually got to convert them to numbers. So I have a problem. And there is a solution. And if we remember when we were playing around with strip for new lines, and I actually made a mistake in the video because that was the one that I wanted. If I do this, strip off, it's not very clear on there, but strip off a space. Okay, that's pretty much what I want to do. I want to take a look at this space between the Joe and the 20, but I don't want to strip it because that would just leave me with Joe 20 and no space. There's another string function that we can use that I'll just have a look for, and it doesn't appear to be in here. They don't seem to be doing all of them. Okay, I can't see it. Nope. Good grief. I'll have to tell you what it is then. There we go. It's split strings. So what we need to do is split the string. So if I've got hello space world, and if I can split it on a space, then I will end up with a list, not a string, a list consisting of a string called hello with no space or one called world with no space. So I start off with a string, I split it around the space character, and I end up with a list consisting of 2 values, 2 strings. So let's take a look at that in here. So I've got my data. Let me just print my data out, Joe and 20. If I do this, data dot split around a space, so I need the quote, a space, a quote, and end, and then press enter. It splits it into a list consisting of Joe, a string Joe, and the string 20, which is basically what I want. So I could write score. Don't forget, data has not changed. Even though I've split it, data is still Joe 20. Remember, it's immutable, it doesn't change. So if I want it to change, I could assign it to data again, or I could just put score equals data dot split, and now if I type score, I've got a list, not a string, consisting of 2 items, Joe and 20, and data remains the same. So that's the theory behind what I want to do. I want to split it. Now, if I know that I've got a high score list like this, I'm only ever going to have 2 items, a name and a number, name and a number, name and a number, all the way down my list, then I can use that information to help me pull the value out of there rather than a string. So that is called casting. So if I've got a string, let's say a num equals 35. If I print num, it's just going to give me 35 as a string. But if I choose to convert that by casting int, which means take whatever it is, num, which was 35 as a string, and cast it to an integer, it gives me the value 35, not the string 35. And I can use my knowledge of lists by using the index. Remember the pointers where we are. So this is 0, this is 1, okay, and I assign that to score. So I can actually turn that 20 in there into a number by using my cast here. That might be a bit complicated at the moment to understand, to get your head round, but stay with it, stick with it, and it will become clear. So if I do score 1, that is looking at the 20 here. If I want that to be a number and not a string, I would cast it into an integer. So if I do int score 1, I should see 20 without any speech marks around it. However, if I just did score 1, I have a string. So without changing anything, I can access my information, my number, and I can turn it into a number, and then I can compare it with another number. So that's really what I want to do for my high score list. Okay, and we need now to jump back to sort of our sorted routine to be able to understand how we're going to play with this, how we're going to put a sequence of names and numbers into a sorted order based on the number part of the name. We're going to be using the split, and we're going to be using a cast to help us perform this task. Quite intricate, but bear with me, we'll try and get through it.